Hello, everyone. Um, it is hard to believe it is already April. I wanted to share some things about what you can expect this month and looking a little bit ahead. So as we continue through April and May, I will keep coming back to this flow chart just to remind you what you've already accomplished, what's on task for now, and what is to come. So presently, you are focusing on building your support system. You are determining those academic mentors that have subject matter expertise who are going to be able to advise you. You're also locating your community organization who shares a similar interest to yours. And Keat and I have enjoyed conversations with many of you and hope that others will certainly reach out if you need assistance connecting with organizations. We've been participating in calls and meetings, really just to help bridge the communication and make sure that those organizations understand what you can offer them and also what you'll need from them. So, yeah, just keep in mind that I guess exploration can be in the form of meetings, or if there are one-time service opportunities or ways that you can shadow, that might be another way to gain insights into the workings of an organization and just to sort of figure out if it's a good fit for you. So some of you are a little ahead of the curve, others may be struggling to meet, certain deadlines. Both are okay. We're here to support you and just want to make sure we're keeping open communication about how you're doing so that we know how to help. I will note that I think the goal to have a site and site mentor by March 29th was maybe a little adventurous on my part. So I acknowledge that and have pushed back that deadline. Our goal now is that everyone has a site determined by orientation. And again, if you think that you're not going to be there by April 14th, please just let us know so that we can sort of get a sense of what your timeline is looking like. Otherwise, we will assume that everyone is on track to have your site determined and hopefully your site mentor as well by the time you come to orientation on April 15th. All right, so once we come to orientation, this is where we're kind of going to be spending a lot of our time. We're going to really focus on defining success and writing a results statement. And I'll share a little bit more about that. The other thing I think that we're really working on right now is this step of defining needs. So there is an assignment talking about, like locating data that defines the need, and we'll continue to define the need through conversation. So those two stages right now are where we are, and then you can see where we're heading. We're going to be thinking about implementation later. So I'll try to say this on multiple occasions, but we really start from the place of what is the goal for the project. And that might feel a little awkward because a lot of times we want to jump in and be like, here's what I'm going to do. I just want to caution you and ask you to just stay in this space with me right now about what our goals are and not to jump too far ahead about what you're going to do, because we want to make sure that there's clarity on where we are heading before we determine how we're going to get there. So today, I just want to review a couple of kind of housekeeping things. Now that you're getting, kind of underway, I want to make sure you feel confident about how to track your hours and show you where your time logs are. I'd like to review the schedule of trainings, touch on the celebration of service and orientation that we have coming up in about a week and a half. I'm going to give you a preview of the project plan so that you see where we're going between now and the end of June. And I hope that by kind of previewing it now, rather than waiting and introducing this in like another month, it helps you see that all of these little kind of steps and assignments right now, they're just a part of the project plan. We're just sort of introducing them in what we feel like is a stepwise fashion. I'd like to just quickly review what we learned over the last month about health equity, and then clarify what my goals are for all of us in April. So timekeeping. All right, so we would like you to track weekly. You're going to enter this information on your time log, and I'm going to flip over in just a moment to show you where in Google Classroom you'll find those logs and what they look like. There are several worksheets on your time log, and so I will point out how you are entering it on what is called the service time log, And then there's going to be another worksheet that sort of summarizes. It's going to be compiling and adding up what you put in on a weekly basis and showing it to us on a monthly. You don't have to enter it there. There are formulas already in the worksheet that will do that for you. So our goal, if you were to spread the hours out evenly, is about 4 to 5 hours a week. And that would, again, help you meet that 200-hour threshold. Now, some of you I know will have projects that maybe are more summer centric. Others may be trying to finish by February in order to, have dedicated step study time in March. So you need to adjust to that according to your aims, but we just like to remind everyone, if you haven't already, kind of set aside 4 to 5 hours a week for ASF. Right now, that might look like going through and doing tasks that are in Google Classroom, but then eventually that'll be more of those dedicated hours at your site. On this spreadsheet, because we're asking you now for weekly and not just monthly, it is totally okay to put a 0 if there was no time spent in a week. Again, a 0 will let us know that you are staying on top of your timesheet. A blank will make us wonder, have they done anything? And we just don't know it because they haven't put it here. So over communicate rather than under communicate. You are going to briefly describe what you did. And then there are 2 kind of optional columns in there right now. So let's take a look at this just so that these notes make more sense. All right, so my Google Classroom looks a little bit different than yours since I'm in the teacher view. Click over here on classwork. Scroll down to this timesheets and reports heading. You are not going to see everyone's. You are only going to see your own. If you see everyone's, let me know because it shouldn't be showing up for you. But let's just click into someone's and take a look. So if you were a partner project, you're going to have the space to do for both of you. If you're an individual, then you're obviously just going to have one. So this project log is kind of like the cover sheet, if you will. This is where I was saying you are not going to enter. This is going to compile it for you. Rather, click on Service Timesheet. And here's where you're going to be starting to record your hours, direct and indirect. You'll write a summary of what you did. The target and notes are the 2 optional columns. We just put those here so that if it helps you to sort of plan out in advance and to know, like, okay, I need to get X number of hours, or I anticipate spending X number of hours each of these weeks in order to kind of stay on track, you're welcome to do that. But if not, just ignore this column for now. The notes, we again left this here just so that maybe Keaton and I can make comments back to you. So let's just see how it goes using, the notes column. But again, service timesheet, direct and indirect. I'm going to clarify in just a moment what we mean by direct versus indirect. There is a third worksheet here, CAB timesheet, that you can ignore for right now, but just know that this is going to be used later once we get started with our community advisory boards. And this is where you will let us know who has participated when. Since that is going to be a compensated activity for CAB members, we want to make sure we have a place where we can easily track what we owe each of those members. So here's where you'll go. As you do so, then that will start adding and again, kind of summing them into these different categories. It will also, you'll see at the bottom, allow you to see your total project hours remaining and your direct service project hours remaining. So what do we mean by direct versus indirect? Well, put simply, and it's never this simple, right? There's a lot of gray, but there's a lot of this in between space. But direct, if you are doing face-to-face time, and face-to-face may mean by phone, it may mean virtual interactions. It may not be literally face-to-face, but if you think about when are you implementing your project? When are you doing the task that you might have previously planned to do, but now you're actually underway with, putting them into practice. That's your direct. Indirect are more of where we're really spending our time now. We're researching, we're looking for data, we will be looking for evidence-informed practices. We'll be having a lot of conversations with people to get qualitative information about these issues. Later, you'll be collecting and evaluating data, having meetings with mentors to check in and get advice. So there's a lot of those kind of what we call administrative or planning or indirect. It all means the same thing. It's those necessary tasks to execute your project, but it's not really involving the, face-to-face implementation. Now, it's always harder to get the direct service. And so one thing we started doing a couple of years ago was trying to think of ways to help you get a jump start on getting direct service. I should say here, and I should have put this in writing, but you are not allowed to start your project until your project plan is approved. So I'll say that one more time. We do not want you to start doing your project until you, your site, your mentors have all agreed that yes, that is what they want you doing. What does that mean? Well, that means that right now we can only do indirect because we don't know yet what we're doing and we haven't gotten approval to really start doing it and getting those direct hours. So again, going back to how can you get a jump start? Well, I really feel like shadowing, volunteering, that could look like completing orientations, attending staff meetings, even just volunteering with existing activities that your site has underway. Really just spending time getting to know the clients of the organization, the staff, how things generally work, building trust, just being present so that they know and get to know you and who you are. That way, when it's time for you to get your project started, they already have a little bit of familiarity with you. So if you'd like to do that, and if your site has those opportunities available, you can go ahead and get started with that in this kind of March, April, May, even June timeframe before your project plan is approved. I think I might have had a typo. No, maybe not. Okay, so I couldn't recall if we had said 10 hours or 20 hours prior to implementation. I've got 20 here. So there you go, up to 20, I guess, of the 100 direct service hours can go ahead and be achieved in these times. The other way that you can kind of think about achieving some extra direct service time is that we want you to support each other's projects. So I mentioned here that you can get up to 5 hours of direct service serving on another fellow's project. Now, this is not going to be an immediate opportunity, but just keep that in the back of your mind. We've had some really great collaborations that have taken place this year. For instance, we had one student who was in nutrition to attend an event and do some trainings for another fellow's project for her project participants. So think about how you can leverage, your expertise for the benefit of others. Or maybe they just need extra hands for kind of a big event that doesn't take place often, and so they just need extra manpower. That's certainly a great opportunity as well. But going back, so our overall expectations are 200 hours overall, at least 100 in direct service. And for those of you who are partners, we still expect you to do the 100 direct service, but you're sharing the planning time. So what this means is that you're going to end up probably with closer to like 150 overall hours, maybe a little less if you're efficient with your planning time. So we have a staggered payment plan, and I think it was in your the employment agreement that you signed, but if you're curious about that, I'm happy to provide more information. But essentially, we prorate your stipend so that the closer you get to the full 200 hours, the closer you get to the full $2,500 stipend. Now, trainings and coaching sessions don't count towards your time, but all of this time that you're spending completing your work in Google Classroom, you really are working on your project plan, whether you know it or not. So that is part of that planning or indirect time. what's our schedule coming up? So speaking of training sessions, we had asked you all to complete a survey letting us know if there were any conflicts in dates. Might have jumped ahead. Maybe I just don't have this written down. So just to know that I'm going to send out an overview of the training calendar. Essentially, the dates that were in the survey worked. The only conflict we saw was in June. The challenge with moving the June date is going to be that if we bump it a week earlier, we're going to be overlapping Father's Day. And if we bump it a week later, we're going to be hitting 4th of July. So I believe 3 people had said they could not attend the June meeting, and we'll just know that that needs to be one of your excused absences, or not even excused. So we ask, and in the responsibilities of a fellow document, you may recall that we have the expectation of 80% attendance at the trainings. So we know that you're going to need to miss for various reasons. We don't ask you to tell us what those reasons are. There are not excused versus unexcused. So just know that, again, we want to be flexible as much as we can. And we know that there are going to be reasons for you to miss. So stay tuned for the overall training calendar. The most, I guess, upcoming activity, of course, is the celebration of service and orientation. So we have invited your academic mentor. I think a few of you maybe named your academic mentor after we sent out those invites. So I will double check to make sure that they were invited. But just know that next year you will have both of your mentors invited, and you'll also be allowed to bring 2 guests. We want you to wear business attire, potentially, I don't know, business casual, but just something that looks professional. We will be taking your photos for the website. We'll take them as individuals, and then we'll also take some group pictures. So the celebration of service will start at 10 a.m., but we would like you to show up at 9:30 on that Saturday, April 15th, and we will wrap up at 1 p.m. on Sunday, April 16th. So orientation basically includes the celebration service. That is taking place at UAB at the Alumni House, and then we will travel individually in our vehicles down to the 4-H Center, which is in Columbiana. We'll be providing meals beginning with lunch on Saturday. There will be some refreshments at the celebration of service as well, but I encourage you to eat breakfast before you come. So lunch, we'll have a late lunch at the 4-H Center. We'll do dinner there that evening, breakfast and lunch on Sunday. For those who've noted that you have any kind of dietary restrictions, I have passed those along to them, and I can give more details about this in the upcoming packet for orientation. So essentially, orientation is going to include some team building activities, workshops, and then a little bit of free time on Saturday evening as well. I understand you may need to be studying for final exams or whatnot, so feel free to bring those materials. We will wrap up either at dinner or with maybe one brief session after dinner. The types of things that we're going to be doing is going to really focus on defining success for your projects and practicing skills that are needed for working with our community advisory boards. So stay tuned for the final agenda. I should be sending that to you by next Monday. It'll include driving directions to the celebration of service, as well as directions leading you from the UAB Alumni House down to the 4-H Center. In terms of packing, I mean, I'll include a packing list, but we stay in their hotel, so you do not have to bring anything like a sleeping bag, sheets, or anything of that nature. Really, it's a casual, we'll wear casual clothes, I guess, weather appropriate clothes, since we will spend a little bit of time outdoors. Right now, the weather's looking, the forecast should be in favor, so that should be great. All right, so our project plan is going to be due, or the draft, I should say, will be due June the 1st. You, again, are working on components of that plan right now, and then you're going to spend the month of June revising it with your mentors and the community advisory board members. So that means that the final version will be signed and submitted to ASF later in June or by the 1st of July. So because there are signatures that we want to be able to verify that everyone does sign off and agree, there's going to be an additional little help sheet about if you need to get electronic signatures and you're not sure how to do that. There's a program we've located that can help you do that, that's free. So let's look at the actual project plan. It has some basic information on the front, your contact information, dates that you plan to be away, approximate number of hours per week. So this is where if you are planning to be away for maybe the summer to do research or an internship or something of that nature, you can note that here about when you'll be away, but that you could also explain sort of how that might impact the number of hours per week that you're going to be doing. And then you'll see a list of sort of headers here, and you may be like, well, what do I put in each of these headers? So this is really just the template that you're going to be typing into, but I want to have you scroll down, and then you're going to get to the examples. So this is really, and I'm not going to go through all of this right now, but I just want to let you know that this resource is going to be available for you to look at in more detail. And really today, I just want to reassure you that we are building this as we go. So it's not going to be a heavy lift once we get to May to prepare this by June, because you will have already been doing pieces of it. But over the course of the next few weeks, you'll be putting together an elevator speech, writing your project profile. We've already been discussing health equity, and you're working on data describing the need so that you can explain why this topic is even necessary. We want to make sure that we're thinking about not only the needs, but also the assets that the community has, that we have clarity around who we're working with, around what our goals are, around that evidence-based material that we're going to use to guide our activities and what we're implementing. And then really kind of breaking it into pieces and thinking about, okay, what do we need? What are those milestones or benchmarks that will help us know if we're on our way to getting to that ultimate goal? And then there will be a more detailed place for you to outline the activities and amount of time that you estimate will be spent on each activity. We know that sometimes it does require either some monetary resources or maybe assistance from other volunteers and time. For ASF of Alabama, we provide you with $100 of seed funds. And so we just want you to be thoughtful from the outset of not building a project that's going to require more than that. So that would be my encouragement, is build a project that doesn't require more than $100 of supplies. Now, if you're doing something that does require more than that, this is where you're going to need to explain to us what your budget is and where you're getting those resources from. Keep in mind that ASF projects are not meant to be fundraising specific. We have had some fellows that have found sources of funding, and we allow them to count that time towards their project, but it is a minor piece of what they're spending their time doing. We don't want you spending all of your time trying to get money to do an activity and then run out of time to actually do the work. So go ahead and be thinking ahead about, what am I going to need? Do I need food for workshops in order to entice people to come? Do I need to provide childcare so that parents can attend? Do I need to provide pedometers so that people can actually track the steps that I'm encouraging them to walk each day? Think about all of those tangible items and how much they're going to cost. And then the last thing, and we'll start to talk about this at orientation, is thinking about, well, how will we know that we've reached that goal we set? How are we evaluating or verifying, that accomplishment? And we never want to build a project without thinking about what will happen when we're gone. Now, not all Schweitzer projects are continued. And so sometimes sustainability looks like just basically knowing for a sight that that strategy did not work and that they will not want to continue it. But sustainability can look like a student organization that continues the work as volunteers, or maybe the staff being trained to implement it. As you talk to the outgoing fellows at the celebration of service, that might be an interesting question to pose to them is, how, if at all, is your project being sustained? And what could you have done differently during the year to increase the likelihood that it would be sustained? I think this is one of those areas where we have a lot of room for improvement as a chapter and as a national organization. And so I'd love for us as a group this year to really commit to thinking about this throughout the year and not waiting until February or March to think about sustainability. So this is the project plan. And again, the examples I think will make a lot more sense. Know that we're going to be taking steps at a time and breaking these down. And your mentors and CAB members are going to be there to help you along the way as well. So speaking of kind of breaking it down, there is the question in your project plan, and you've already answered a question in Google Classroom about health equity. Who is most affected by your topic in an unfair way? Just want to kind of clarify what we mean. You watched the video of Verlin Sally explaining how the UAB health system is addressing health equity, and this is sort of the shared language that we want to use during the year. The differences in health that are unnecessary and avoidable and could be considered unfair and unjust is what health inequities means. So sometimes people use health disparities and health inequities interchangeably, but the difference is that belief that health inequities are rooted in these injustices that don't have to exist. I would say that in ASF, we are addressing health disparities, but we also believe that there are these structural reasons that those disparities exist, and we want to be thoughtful about them so that we don't reinforce, but rather try to address that underlying cause as well. So there are some guiding principles of health equity that you see listed on the left. These came from a document, and I can share it as well, but this is not, I guess I should say, this is not my thinking. This is from a health equity report from several years ago that was specific to Jefferson County. And I believe that even though the report is specific to Jefferson County, these guiding principles apply to all of our efforts, no matter the geographic location where they take place. So on the right are my ASF interpretations of these principles. We want to make sure that through this year, we are considering the social factors that affect your chosen topic and individuals. So even if it's not the primary focus of your project, we are going to be trying to ask ourselves, could we be more effective in getting to our goal if we were asking about and addressing these social issues? We want to make sure that we're not just picking a project or a site or a group of project participants that are convenient, but that we're actually looking at the data to say who is most affected by this, so that we're, again, trying to address where the needs are the greatest. We also want to make sure that we're respecting and valuing lived experience as well as technical expertise. So I think we have easier access to the technical expertise because you live in a world of academia where there are plenty of professors and experts. There is, how to access research, but a lot of times we are a little more disconnected from that lived experience piece. And so that's where we're hoping the community advisory boards help us bridge this year. I've had some questions about what if my project is of a sensitive nature and those with lived experience really don't want to participate on the CAB or don't want to self-identify as being a member of an affected group. Let us know if that's the case, and we're happy to help you work through that. But I think there are ways that we can do it. And so if there are those barriers, let's think about it. Let's see if we can strategize how to do it so that we still have some representation of lived experience, even if we need to adjust how we include those people in order to be respectful of them. And then I mentioned in the project plan, there is a section about assets. Because we inevitably have more of a medical model in the Schweitzer Fellowship approach, a lot of times we can forget that there are good things happening in communities and that sometimes there's this theory of positive deviance where there are going to be individuals who are not susceptible to, for instance, obesity, families who live in food deserts, who have found a way to eat healthy and live healthily. And so what can we learn from them? How can we acknowledge those assets that community has? How can we identify the people who have been successful in addressing those topics? And what can we learn from them? And then we want to make sure we aren't duplicating what exists. That's so critical in these early conversations. So collective impact is a model that really asserts that if there are multiple people, multiple organizations that can agree upon a shared goal, but then take different approaches to address that goal, that they're going to be more effective. And so we just need to think about what are the nuanced ways that we can add to what's being done. And then I have said before that, it's more important for us to over communicate rather than under communicate. In terms of health equity, this really talks about making sure that our messages are clear and are going to be designed for a general audience and not just people who maybe are familiar with health terms and who have a higher level of education. So as you're continuing to work on this data exhibiting a need, we're really wanting you to think about what's the frequency of the problem, how long has it lasted, who does it affect, how severe is it, what equity or perception issues are there. And so we're going to be doing that again through this quantitative as well as qualitative data. And so as you define the specifics of your project, and you're working with Keaton and I to refine those topics, we just want to make sure that the project connects not only to something that you're passionate about, but also something that meets a community identified need. And so we're looking at the data to see if it supports the topic. And I loved that several of you in your responses about health equity also acknowledge that we've got to value the input of the community that we're seeking to partner with and verify that it's seen as a priority to them. So there will be a separate, training about the community advisory boards, kind of walking us through the toolkits that I've posted, just because I know that there's probably a lot more questions about that. But just know that, again, the community advisory boards are going to be important for that qualitative data. So what do we need to do by the end of this month? Well, we are going to write a results statement or draft a results statement that we'll later take to our site and our CABs that really seeks to define success. It's going to be asking the question, what will change, for whom, by when, and by how much? That might sound familiar to SMART goals if you've written those in the past. We're going to delve into this more at orientation. We'll also talk about something called a logic model. We're going to brainstorm stakeholders for your CAB. I know some of you have already been successful in getting some members committed, but I'm going to push back that deadline beyond orientation because, again, I know that some of you are still getting your sites, and I want you to have conversations with your sites about who should be on your CAB. And then lastly, we're going to practice and start thinking about those communication. How do we talk about our project in plain language? How do we describe it? This comes back to that elevator speech and the project profile that will be part of your project plan. So we're going to knock out a lot and be really busy and I think effective at our orientation time. After orientation, then it'll be up to you to make sure you can get 3 confirmed CAB members and then to continue collecting any of that data that you are going to need to narrow the scope of your project. That's going to lead us then to the second blue section about researching evidence-informed practices and then putting it all together in your project plan. The evidence-based practices will be something that we will tackle more in May. By May, we should have a clearer understanding of not only what the problem is that we're trying to address, but also we're going to then be asking ourselves, how will we know or excuse me, we'll also know by May how we will measure whether or not we've been effective in addressing it. That what degree of change and how many people will be our target by April 1st. So then that will lead us to ask the question, well, how do we get there? What strategies will be effective to help people or the organization reach that goal? And what can we learn from others who've tried something similar? So our May meeting will be abbreviated. It'll only be an hour because the other hour of our training session will be taken up by the National ASF Gathering with new fellows from around the country. I've posted an RSVP link for you to go ahead and let the National Collaborative know that you'll be attending that as well. So again, coming back to evidence-informed practices, once we know what activities we think we need to do to be effective, we'll start putting them into that timeline, making those milestones or benchmarks, whatever you want to call them, and really just drafting that project plan. Okay, that is all for April. I look forward to seeing you at orientation. If you have any questions before then, don't hesitate to reach out. Watch for the final, I guess, orientation agenda, but know that we will look forward to seeing you at 9:30 a.m. on April 15th at the UAB Alumni House. Take care.